Namaskaram. I am Vidhya Subramanian, a Bharatanatyam dancer. I learnt Bharatanatyam initially at the age of 8 from Dr. Padma Subramanian, under whom I studied the Adavis. Later, at the age of 11, I shifted to Guru SK Rajaratnam, Swami Mohalahiri Rajaratnam, and did my Arangetram under his guidance. At the age of 17 or so, I also started learning Abhinaya from Srimati Kalanidhi Narayanan, the exponent. When I think about classes, how they were at that time, with Vadyar, it was 3 times a week, and invariably my classes were at 7 a.m. Just before I went to school, I got through the process of sweating it out, and it was a wonderful start to the day, in fact, where the mind and body were wrung dry, through dancing an entire margam. So with classes being this way, structured in this way, and music being such a quintessential part of class, because Vadyar was a phenomenal musician, an excellent singer himself. So in every class he sang for, whether it was a Varnam or a Tilana or a Padam or any of the compositions. So we got so spoiled, I would say, with that level of musicality. And so inherently musicality is a big part of the Vazhuvoor tradition as a result, because a lot of these Natavanars were brilliant musicians as well. In fact, recently I did a lecture demonstration on the Vazhuvoor Bani in San Diego, and learned so much about this tradition of how music and dance were hand in glove with each other through this Bani. Since classes were like this 3 times a week, and that sense of taking for granted this, marinating, this urufying as we say, that happened over the years, I think by the time I got to my Arangetram, which was on June 8th, 1984, I was in a space where at that point I was not sure if dance was going to be my profession. There was so much out there as a teenager that was available to pursue. But it was at my Arangetram that I realized that this is what I wanted to do. I'm a performer at heart. For me, that joy of communicating with the audience is very, very essential. That cyclical nature of what the audience gives you and what you are able to give back in return. After this, of course, Kalanidhi Mami brought a very different spectrum of learning that she introduced to us, where we explored the emotional scape of the person, of the human being, and how it intersected with life itself through the Abhinaya compositions that she taught us. So it was a very well-rounded system of learning, I will say, that I was privileged to be a part of. A lot of what I learned was from watching the greats of that time, the seniors of that time. I would say about 50% of my learning was from watching, as much as it was from the classroom. So I also want to say that I feel truly privileged to have been part of a generation that learned from these Nattuvanars, directly from the Nattuvanars who belonged to a legacy that was of a lost time, of a different time. We no longer have them. So how we learned was very different. We took it for granted at that time, but for me at this point it's so part of my journey that I cannot separate that way of learning anymore with how I dance, which may be very different from what I used to, how I used to dance before. Still, that ethos is, the vari is part of me, and it's very hard to pick apart what or how that is codified or explained. It's only something that you absorb as you watch and listen. In fact, it is in my Arangetram that I did Mamohalahiri Meerudhe, Swarajathi, that was composed by Kadigai Namachivaya Pulavar. And I will say that, at that time, learning a Varnam, the goal was never to understand the deeper import of the Sahityam, to explore the context, subtext, all of that. When we learnt it, it was simply, Jati preceded Sahityam and essentially Padartha. So Vadya taught it, and in fact, Nattuvanars of course did not get up and dance. So they sat down and taught, right? So he would just say, "Ipdi pannu, abdi pannu," and Abhinayam of course he would show a little bit, but they were not performers themselves. So a lot of it was left to my imagination as a student, which is why a lot of the students from who learned from these traditional Nattuvanars will look very different, even if we are doing the same composition. There is somewhere the intersection between what the teacher taught and what we have brought to it, and that's a beautiful meeting, I would say, meeting place where the soloist is created. So this Varnam or anything that I learned at that time, it was approached in a way where we did what our teachers told us to do. And at my Arangetram, I did other compositions, of course, Pushpanjali, Jatis, Swaram, Alaripu, the Shabdam and all that, the entire repertoire that we used to do. And after that, to be honest, I performed this Swarajathi only 2 more times. I just want to speak a little bit about how the arts flourished during that time, because I feel it's a very different landscape now. Connoisseurs, Sabha secretaries would come and watch promising talent, would come and, by word of mouth, they would hear about talented dancers. There was no social media, of course, at that time. So they would actually come and watch our performances, and then we would get invitations to dance after that. Within a month after my Arangetram, I was invited to perform at the Brahmagana Sabha, and within a year at Rasika Ranjani Sabha, Krishnagana Sabha, Bharati Vidya Bhavan, the Yelisai Nadakamandram scholarship happened, and then of course my first tour outside of India, which was for the World Youth Festival in Russia in 1985, I think.
பரதநாட்டியத்துக்கு போனது நீங்க மட்டும் தான்?
ஆமா, பரதநாட்டியத்துக்கு நான் மட்டும் தான் போனேன். மற்றபடி கதக், ஒடிசில
வந்தீங்க. அங்க எந்தெந்த இடத்துல நிகழ்ச்சிங்க பண்ணீங்க? மொத்தம் எத்தனை நிகழ்ச்சிங்க பண்ணிருப்பீங்க? அங்க 8 நாளைக்கு ஃபெஸ்டிவல் நடந்தது. அதுல 5 நாளைக்கு எனக்கும் இன்னொரு டான்ஸருக்கும் மேக்ஸிமம் நம்பர் ஆஃப் ப்ரோக்ராம்ஸ் 5 நாளைக்கு கொடுத்துருந்தாங்க. அதில் முதல்ல இந்தியா கிளப்னு ஒரு இடம் இருக்குது, அங்கே இனாக்ரேஷனில் ஆடினேன். அப்புறம் வியட்நாமீஸ் டெலிகேஷன் அங்கே ரஷ்யாவில், அப்புறம் ஜிடிஆர் கிளப், அண்ட் தென் காலா இந்தியா ஃபெஸ்டிவல்னு ஒன்று நடந்தது, அதில் ஆடினேன். அப்புறம் கடைசியில் இந்தியன் கம்யூனிட்டி ஆஃப் ரஷ்யா அங்கே அதுக்கு ஆடினேன்.
So when dance was such an integral part of one's being, this environment was so conducive to only thinking about school dance. So dance became an obsession for me after that. Then 99 performances later, in the year 1990, I didn't do my 100th. In the year 1990, I moved to the US, where I lived for 30 years, and my journey as a teacher began there. I started teaching at a very young age, engaging with students of all ages in the US, and for 25 years I taught and learned so much through that process as well, through that journey as well. So this is sort of a little bit about how I learned and what my career trajectory was like. A lot of the focus at that time was repeating what Vadyar had taught, but it was also about building the stamina required to perform a Varnam on stage for the Arangetram. So the focus was essentially in how do you sustain stamina. In fact, Vadyar would often tell my mother, "Idukku konjam iron edha kudungo," because I would wilt by the time the third jati came around. It's so interesting. The energy now I have to sustain a Varnam is a lot more than I did as a 16-year-old. And so focus was essentially on the stamina part of it, right? So the Varnam, we never looked at it as this is a composition that I want to delve deeper into the meaning, the import of the composer and all that. And I'll add here another reason why I did not, I actually set aside this Varnam, although at that time I didn't consciously realize this is what it was. See, Mamohalahiri Meerudhe is on Muruga, the quintessential Tamil god. And Muruga was my childhood imaginary friend. So often I would confide in him, I would talk to him. I was an only child. So for me, that was the way I developed a person that I could confide everything in. So he was sort of this friend. So it was very difficult for me to feel Sringaram for him at that time. And I think when I thought about it years later is when I realized that was part of the reason why I somehow was not able to revisit this Varnam immediately after my Arangetram and a couple of other performances. I moved on to Manaviche Kona, Ema Eladira, Sendil Mevum, so many other Varnams that Vadyar taught. But 40 years later, in 2024, the 40th year of my Arangetram, I got an invitation to perform for Purnamargam, conducted by Natyarangam, and that is where somehow I was drawn to revisit Mamohalahiri. And when I did so, it was as an adult, a person who had a wealth of not just dance experience but life experience. So the way I was able to look at this Swarajathi, the way I was able to ideate, to think about it, it was a joy for me, that process. It was an immense challenge to be able to work towards a Purna Margam. So this, and I repeated a lot of the compositions that I did in my Arangetram. So at that point, the Swarajathi took on a very different shape, a different life almost, and that is the version that I will be presenting for Varnajalam. Kadigai Namachivaya Pulavar, also known as Kadigai Pulavar, lived sometime during the 17th century, and he is said to have been the court poet of Venkateshwara Ettappa Nayakar I, who was a ruler of the Ettayapuram Taluk. His contribution to Tamil literature is immense. He is said to have written many operatic ballets, including Valli Bharatam, Samudra Vilasam, and also many Tanipadals, individual compositions in Tamil. In fact, he is said to have written some of the first Swarajatis in Tamil, which then became part of the Bharatanatyam repertoire in the courts of that time. So a lot of the intersection between music, poetry, dance, all of this was so inherent in this cultural landscape that came together through many poets' contributions, and Kadigai Namachivaya Pulavar is one such. Mohalahiri Meerudhe is a Swarajathi that is actually part of Valli Bharatam. So it was extracted later and presented separately as a composition in the Bharatanatyam repertoire. So it is part of this entire dance drama called Valli Bharatam. In this composition, which is in Khamas Ragam, Rupakatalam, Muruga is the deity, Shringaram is the underlying emotion. But when we look at the lyrics, the Tamil itself is of a very different quality, of not something that we would have heard in a, say, Dandayadapani Pillai's Varnam or many other Tamil Varnams that we are used to seeing. The Tamil itself is from an earlier era, a slightly older version of Tamil. Some of the words are not in use even in the modern Tamil landscape. If we look at the lyrics, Mamohalahiri Meerudhe enna seiguven, Valiyavan aanalum poi varavenum enna seiguven, Seeman Kumarattendiran Dinam Pani Kalugachala Velavan, Than Mathiram Tanithirikkum Samayam Parthu Vadi Podi. This is the Pallavi and Anupallavi. She is of course talking about her longing. The Nayika is talking about her longing for Muruga. Mohalahiri Meerudhe enna seiguven, what do I even do? Valiyavan aanalum poi varavenum enna seiguven. Even if he is that strong Muruga, that person who is surrounded by such a coterie of family and army, I am the one who has to go and approach him. This is the basic meaning, of course. Cheeman Kumarit. So a lot of the context is given, even at Tepuram, the whole that space, Kalugachala Velavan is what we are talking about. Then there is a story in which he is said to have vanquished many asuras, Muruga. After vanquishing many asuras, he is said to have become tired and exhausted, and then came across this this Ettayapuram area where he rested. And in that space, the temple was built for him. So that is also written into the composition. And in the first half, we see this flavor of Shringaram, this longing, this yearning. Then we come to the tongue twister, the Chittaswara Sahityam, which I have to refer to my notes to read so I don't make a mistake. Made Suma Visanama Paraginoridam Malai Varumun Unadu Piriyama Kavarugira Oru Vidamana Adena Adariyum Mun Mara Uruvili Vegu Saramari Yenai Uruvili Ena Matrida Adena Maga. So it's a tongue twister for most singers. But when we hear it sung in Khamas, the Swarakshara of Ma is so intrinsic to this Chittaswara Sahityam especially, where it stops, it sort of takes a pause at that Ma every time. In the second half, there is a sudden switch actually, where she becomes a little disillusioned because he obviously has not come, and it's it's colloquial, it's very conversational, but also the Tamil is hard to understand. And she says, "O ho ho mane enni rasai sugamadi aadavar uravu sadama ennuvadu pisagadi." So as you can hear, the Tamil itself is very different. So she says, "Oh friend, what is the use of falling in love? Why should I even bother? I can be by myself. I am enough. When all you're surrounded by is men who don't know how to make a meaningful relationship to create a so it's so far ahead of its times in terms of how she could turn the tables and approach the Sringaram. And in the rest of the Charanam, she sort of makes a case for this and argues it in different ways as to why she would rather be alone. Traditionally, any Varnam is performed, you have the Jatis that are interspersed with the Sahityam, and it's a beautiful play between the two in the traditional sense. When I look at a composition like this, or any Varnam, I would say, for me, the Jati is merely an extension of the Nayika's emotional longing, so that the two do not feel like two separate sections where we are, switching emotionally from one to the other. No. It is out of her longing that the next Jati arises. So that is the way I approach my thought process when choreographing any Varnam or Swarajati. And this is no different. I feel it is one of the most luxurious and beautiful compositions in the Bharatanatyam repertoire. The Varnam it provides this large soundscape, it provides an emotional spectrum within which you can explore anything, and you have the luxury of time and emotional stretching, if you will, where you don't have to confine yourself to any one particular space, time wise or space wise or emotion wise. And so somewhere in the middle of the Varnam is where I tend to, the same third Jati that used to cause me a lot of angst and pain physically, is where I actually come to realize the beauty of the Varnam, where she's in the throes of her longing at the extreme point of it, and it's sort of from there it's just like flying through it, right? So the Varnam to me is simply the most beautiful composition in a repertoire that provides so much potential for the dancer to explore. And I feel that the Nayika is often a sort of crossover and a marriage between the character and myself. So I often say this, that the two are in conversation with each other. So the Nayika is whomever the composer envisioned in his or her mind. So we are digging deep into the Sahityam to discover, like a detective, what he would have intended. But then somewhere there is who I am as a person, what my life as a person, what my life experiences are that are meeting this character, the Nayika, that the composer intended. So in this intersection where I color her and she colors me, Sringaram is born for me. So the Varnam is this immensely beautiful, for want of a better word, space where the dancer can rebel. So I'm really, really happy that Lamps has decided to create a space for the Varnam, an entire festival, 2 days, where audiences will get to see very different approaches, different musical compositions, of course, different choreographies, and artists themselves. So the variety of artists that have been chosen, the variety of Varnams that have been chosen is very exciting. And I'm truly thrilled and excited to be part of this festival on June 27th and 28th. I will be performing on 28th. I think it's imperative for young dancers to be there, to learn not only how these Varnams can be approached, but in a Varnam like, in a Swarajathi like Mamohalahiri, to understand the historical context of an entire time period of a language and how compositions were created during that time. It's a revelation, and it's therefore imperative that we do more of this. We actually bring these rare Varnams back more and more. So please do come on June 27th and 28th for Varnajalam, conducted by Lambs. Tickets are available on KYN. I hope to see all of you there. Namaskaram.
Take